Good evening and welcome to another Wednesday night devotional here with us at Netherwood. For a while now, Masha and I have been watching a TV show called Hoarders. We've been going through a bunch of their episodes, and the TV show is about following these people who have compulsive hoarding tendencies. Now that means that they start collecting a lot of stuff in their house, so much stuff that it becomes extreme and it's very unstable, and it makes for very, very poor living conditions. Some people will hoard stuff, and they'll take things and pile them up, so much so that it threatens to actually crush them were these piles to fall over. Some people hoard such stuff like trash in such a way that a bunch of insects and other nasty critters get into the house and they start to destroy things. One person had such a problem that parts of her house were caving in. Another person had such a struggle that they found over 30 dead cats among her things and her possessions. Another person had to sleep in this nest-like thing, among some trash at the front door because there was just no other place for him to sleep or to be. Another person ended up buying a second home just to store more things. So this TV show follows these people, and they hire a professional organizer, a professional crew, and a professional therapist to help them sort through it all. But they can't just go in and start emptying out stuff from this person's house. They can't do that because nothing is resolved if that's all they do. Instead, they try to treat the person. They try to help them understand what they're going through and be able to part with their things. Hoarders usually have suffered trauma in their life, which created this compulsive disorder. One person said that they lost both their mom and their dad, and were sent to go live with some other relatives. But the other relatives never really treated her as if she were part of the family, and in fact, they got so sick of her that they took all of her belongings and put them into a fire, some kind of like barrel fire, and they had her watch as all of her stuff was destroyed. Compulsive hoarders usually have something that goes wrong in their life, something with which they're trying to cope with, something with which they're trying to ease the pain. And it becomes an entirely new animal in and of itself. And though there's different reasons for hoarding, some people hoard because they're trying to fill a hole in their life. Some people hoard because they just feel so depressed that they have no other choice. But some people truly have difficulty, if not the inability, to tell what's trash and what is treasure. And we see that the people of God tend to struggle with this very same thing too. We may be able to hear about stories of hoarding, excessive hoarding, and think, "Oh, I could never do that. I don't understand why people do that." But we do. We really do understand the difference or the struggle of not being able to tell the difference between trash and treasure. God's people have always struggled with this idea. Israel chose to follow idols. They chose to believe that their goods and that their blessings actually came from carved blocks of stone or wood instead of the almighty creator of this universe. Israel became so consumed with wealth and treasure that they ended up creating such injustice, and they crushed the poor people, such that God would send prophets to them, and they ended up being exiled because of it. When they came back from exile, they began to build houses of their own, and they totally neglected to build God a house, a temple, until God reminded them that there's going to be a famine until they actually finish doing for God what they have been doing for themselves, which is simply building a place to live. The Pharisees loved rituals, and they loved it so much, they loved all these rules, that they actually forgot to love a relationship with their Creator. And so people have struggled with this for a long time. What's trash? What's treasure? What ought I prioritize in my life? Jesus' ministry actually shows us what's trash and what's treasure. Jesus does a very good job of actually showing us that a lot of the things that this world values as treasure is actually trash. And a lot of the things that this culture thinks is trash is actually treasure. Jesus condemned the Pharisees. He condemned these people who were supposed to be such great, such outgoing, such wonderful people, people who had their lives put together. And instead, he spent time with the outcast people. And so this brings us to Luke chapter 12, verses 13 through 34. Go ahead if you want and open up in your Bible and go ahead and read that. I'll be reading that for us right here today. Again, that's Luke chapter 12, starting in verse 13. Some in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." But he said to him, "Man, who made me a judge or arbiter over you?" And so he said to them, "Take care and be on your guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions." And he told them a parable, saying, "The land of a rich man produced plentifully, and he thought to himself, 'What should I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops.' And he said, 'I'll do this. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, Soul, you have ample good laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry.' But God said to him, 'You fool, this night your soul is required of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be? So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich towards God.'" A rich man hoards up his productivity in order to have a good life, quote, good life, and he tears down his barns to build bigger ones. But he ends up losing his life just when he thought he was at the peak of his fulfillment, just when he believed to have amassed enough treasure in his household. That's when things went wrong. We could imagine a hoarder who feels that just as they have filled their house with just enough stuff, they find out that it's all actually trash. This is how it goes when you value trash over treasure, when you value things that really aren't as valuable as we thought they were, and we miss out on the things that truly were valuable. Let's keep reading. Starting in 22. And he said to his disciples, "Therefore I tell you, do not be anxious about your life, what you will eat, or about your body, what you will put on. For life is more than food, and the body is more than clothing. Consider the ravens. They neither sow nor reap. They have neither storehouse nor barn, and yet God feeds them. Of how much more value are you than birds? And which of you, by being anxious, can add a single hour to his span of life? If then you are not able to do as small a thing as that, why are you anxious about the rest? Consider the lilies, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. Yet I tell you, even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. But if God so clothes the grass, which is alive in the field today, and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, how much more will he clothe you, O you of little faith? And do not seek what you are to eat and what you are to drink, nor be worried. For all the nations of the world seek after these things, and your Father knows that you need them. Instead, seek his kingdom, and these things will be added to you. Fear not, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions, give to the needy. Provide yourself with money bags that don't grow old, with a treasure in heaven that doesn't fail, where no thief approaches and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So Jesus, after telling this parable about the rich man who has hoarded up things for himself, to make himself happy, to make himself safe and secure, he says, don't actually seek after all those things. Don't worry about your life. Don't worry about what you're going to eat. Don't fret about what you'll wear. Don't, if we can modernize this just a bit, don't worry about paying mortgage. Don't worry about all those things, because God knows that you need them. God's not oblivious. God doesn't sit up in the clouds, twiddling his thumbs, not disconnected from our needs of our life. No, God knows that you need them. But what do? We make sure we prioritize treasure over trash. We say to God, God, what really matters in this world is your righteousness and your kingdom. And for that, I will seek those things first. And when we seek righteousness first, when we actively put God's kingdom first in our lives, when we actively try to live like Christ, and when we make that important enough to supersede everything else, everything else that we need comes to us automatically. Now, a note for us in the American culture who seem to be very concerned about not just having enough or what we need, but everything we could ever want. God's not going to give us everything we could ever want. He's not a Santa Claus who goes around saying, you've been a good boy or a good girl, therefore I'm going to give you anything your heart desires. No, the Bible says that God cares, that God understands what we need, probably better than we do. Wouldn't it be weird if we were to be called out for seeing priorities as mixed up as a person who struggles with compulsive hoarding? Wouldn't it be weird for someone to have to sit down with us and explain the difference between trash and treasure? Well, it's oftentimes a shock, a wake-up call for the hoarders, and as they finally understand and they begin to see for the first time in years what is actually worth keeping and what isn't. So I found a small test that kind of flies under the radar, and it kind of helps expose what exactly we value in this life. Every single one of us has ever been approached and, oh, how are you doing today? And we'll typically respond something like, oh, I'm doing fine. And then we'll give them a detail about our life, about something recent that's happened that either we're proud of, or we think they'll be proud of, or in some way we believe indicates that we're living a good life. I am doing good because, and then here's something from my life that evidences that I'm doing good. I'm doing fine. Life is great for me. And what we'll usually respond with is, I'm doing fine. My little girl is taking gymnastics and she's doing well, and she dances around like a ballerina a lot. Or, oh, I'm doing fine. I made a lot of progress on that project I wanted to do. Or, I'm doing fine. We just went out and had a great time last night with friends, with some family. I'm having a great time because I got everything I wanted for my Christmas, for Christmas. And the list can go on and on and on and on and on. And some of these things are, bear with me, a bit shallow. I'm doing great because I got to have the newest, latest, and greatest fill in the blank. Some of these things are something we really do, we really ought to be proud for. I'm having a good time because my son got out of prison. Things like that. But what we usually, in fact, I'll go out to say what we never hear is, I'm doing good because I spent a good time, a good chunk of time in prayer with God just recently. I'm doing good because I confessed something to God and I got that off my chest and I feel like God forgave me. Or I'm doing good because even though I didn't really feel it in the moment, I felt God calling me to do something I didn't want to do, and man, I'm glad I did that. Or I'm doing good because I felt like I really made God proud today. What's weird is we usually never hear something like that. even from Christians talking to other Christians. And I wonder, why is that? Why don't we ever talk about the things that we did that are spiritual? Why don't we ever tell people, I'm doing good because my soul is doing good? Instead, we seem to want to talk about our things, or about our accomplishments, or about how our life seems to be going good. And I wonder if for some reason we might, like this rich man, believe that we're at the peak of our fulfillment. And if maybe in the process of this peak fulfillment we have forgotten what's trash and what's treasure. Perhaps if you're like me and I went through the things that I tell people when I tell them how grateful I am for things that have been going on, I kind of realize that some of the things I'm thankful for perhaps have too much of a priority in my own life. And I thought I would share that with you because if you're anything like me, we can always use a good tune-up on what our priorities are about. Hoarders try to fill a hole caused by trauma with material things. They try to ease that hole and the burden in their heart with material things. We often try to find meaning in hollow things too. We often give these things that hold no candle to God as if they were the greatest thing this world has ever seen. And we do that, and our culture does that, and sometimes we slip, and sometimes we make a mistake. Sometimes, like a hoarder, we kind of look around and realize for the first time, whoa, my life is filled with trash. I need to get rid of this. I need to get rid of this because it's not worth what the real treasure is. Let's go ahead and read as our last verse for tonight, Luke chapter 9, verses 23 and following. If you want to go ahead and turn there in your own Bible and read along, that would be awesome. Luke chapter 9, verses 23 and following. And Jesus said to them all, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross daily, and follow me. For whoever would save his life, or as I might put it, whoever puts his life first, will lose it. But whoever loses his life, or as we might say for today, puts their life at a low priority, will, because of me, for my sake, will indeed save it. For what does it mean? What does it matter? What does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses himself or his soul? What does it matter if you gain everything you could have ever hoped for, everything you could have wished for, and you forfeit your very self for that reason? For whoever is ashamed of me and of my words, of him will the Son of Man be ashamed, when he comes in his glory and the glory of the Father and of the holy angels. Jesus is ashamed of those who don't take glory, who don't take delight in him. Jesus is ashamed of people who put other things above where Christ ought to be. Ashamed when we put our own lives in front. If we are ashamed of Christ, Christ is indeed ashamed of us. Now, I don't know about you, but I believe that both you and I want to be the kind of people that Christ is not ashamed of. I want a professional crew, so to speak, and that professional crew is Jesus, to come into my life and to take out all the trash, all the garbage, all the stuff that doesn't belong there, all the stuff that for years I've thought was useful and valuable and really isn't. I want Christ to come into my house, to open up my eyes to things that are really, truly valuable, and to help me organize my life in such a way that not only is my house in order, but my life benefits from. Because truly, there is no better life than a Christian life. There is no better way to live than living as Jesus would have us. So I want to encourage us all, especially myself. This lesson is meant for me, perhaps more than anybody else. But I want to encourage us all to take a look at our life, to look around our proverbial house and to find out what's trash and what's treasure, and to find the strength to begin to let those things go in order that Christ might have his way in our life.